Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today,
this Eurovision Song Contest,
the global song contest that set off mass protests.
I think there's no way that Israel should be able to participate in Eurovision.
Why Israel's participation in Eurovision threatens to overshadow the whole event. I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take. Baby Lasagna, Bambi Thug, Windows 95 Man. These are just some of the competitors making headlines at this year's Eurovision in Malmö, Sweden. All of them are hoping to achieve the kind of worldwide fame that launched the careers of ABBA and Celine Dion. Those current competitors' names seem on brand with Eurovision's quirky style of entertainment that's delighted audiences for almost 70 years. In 2024, organizers are hoping for more of the same. But this year's contest, with Israel competing against a backdrop of the war on Gaza, is no ordinary affair. Nils Adler is an Al Jazeera producer based in Sweden, reporting from Malmö. I spoke to him on Thursday, before the end of the semifinals.
I'm a producer with Al Jazeera. I report from lots of different locations, including Israel and Palestine. But right now, I'm outside of Malmö, in the south of Sweden.
Well, Nils, welcome back to The Take. For our audience that's outside of Europe who may not be familiar with Eurovision or the fact that not every country in it is in Europe, can you give us a taste of the Eurovision mania, especially in this year's host nation, Sweden?
So just to briefly explain what Eurovision is, it's an international song competition organized by the European Broadcasting Union, the EBU, and participating countries, they put forward an original entry that then performs live. And the public in those countries then vote for their favorite act. And then whoever amasses the most amount of points is the ultimate winner of Eurovision. Now, last year, Sweden won Eurovision, so it's hosting Eurovision now in Malmö. To explain to people who don't know what Eurovision is, it's very, I would describe it as kitsch. And perhaps, I don't want to be rude, but I guess you could describe the music as Eurotrash. So it's fun, it's commercial. I have a 6-year-old son who's obsessed with one of the songs, but it's not necessarily one for music snobs. But usually whoever wins Eurovision, the song will become very popular for that year and fill the floors of various clubs. Finland's always a great entry. They come out with some heavy rock music with some kind of unusual theme. Though the acts are quite tongue-in-cheek. I would say, in terms of standout performances, Loreen, the Swedish artist, she came out with 2 different songs that have become huge hits. Last year's Tattoo has become a big hit as well. But Sweden actually has a domestic competition to pick the winner for the eventual Eurovision competition. And that is huge. About 1 in 3 Swedes tune in to see the final of that domestic competition called Melodifestivalen. So in Sweden, Eurovision is absolutely massive. So Loreen winning last year was a really big deal.
So this is the 68th edition of Eurovision, and it sounds like, based on what you're describing, it's usually pretty light and frothy, normally. Not so much this year. Can you explain the controversy to us?
The controversy around Eurovision is, in some ways, a very antithesis of what Eurovision is supposed to be, just a happy-go-lucky music competition. But of course, Israel's participation has changed everything. Now, if we take a step back, what's interesting about this year's event is that it's being held in Malmö, which is Sweden's 3rd biggest city. 1 in every 3 Malmö residents are foreign-born, the majority of those in Iraq or Syria. So it is a metropolitan city and it's multicultural. So winning the right to host the competition was a big deal for the city. In a way, it was meant to celebrate the good side of it, the multiculturalism. It's also been much maligned in the media for having high crime rates. It's also fallen in with the very far-right narratives that kind of connects the high level of migration with these high levels of crime. So yeah, it was a chance to kind of rewrite its identity. But then, of course, when Eurovision came to Malmö and the war in Gaza began, and Israel's participation was confirmed in December, everything kind of flipped. And the fact that the city has a very strong anti-Zionist history kind of came to the fore. So right now, there are huge marches going on. There's been large pro-Palestinian demonstrations for many, many years in Malmö. So I think it's not just Israel's participation, but it's where it is that makes it so tense this year.
So basically, we are seeing mass protests because of the war on Gaza. As many as 20,000 protesters are expected to take to the city streets on Saturday. What's going on there?
Well, there's been a very, very strong protest movement since Israel's participation was confirmed back in December last year. And that's just been gradually growing. Around over 1,000 Swedish artists signed a petition wanting to see Israel banned. So a boycott of the competition.
Some 1,000 artists in Eurovision host country Sweden, including pop star Robin, have called for Israel to be banned over the war in Gaza.
And since then, a lot of artists who were due to perform the acts that surrounded the events, about 20% of them have withdrawn their participation because of Israel taking part. Right now in Malmö, you have murals with pro-Palestinian graffiti. You also have a lot of protest events taking place.
Like what?
Well, you actually have Palestine Vision, which is an alternative, what they describe as a genocide-free alternative to the Eurovision Song Contest. So it follows the same format. You're going to have semi-finals and then you're going to have a final. So that's a kind of fun alternative. It's held in a very hip part of Malmö. You also have Ship to Gaza, which is a ship that's part of the Freedom Flotilla that wants to see an end to the blockade of Gaza. That's docked somewhere off by Malmö now, hosting lots of family-friendly events, so face painting, poetry slams. There's a reggae artist performing, there's a rock artist performing. So yeah, there's a whole host of alternative protest events going on at the moment.
After the break, why wearing a Palestinian keffiyeh got one former contestant a slap on the wrist. So, Nils, the Israeli contestant performed in the semifinal on Thursday, and she was booed during a rehearsal on Wednesday. Protesters feel that Israel should have been banned from the event altogether, and many of them are pointing to what they see as a precedent from just 2 years ago. That's when Russia was banned from Eurovision because of its invasion of Ukraine.
The Eurovision people are kicking out Russia, saying that letting Russia compete would, quote, bring the contest into disrepute, end quote, meaning disgrace.
So you have people saying that there's a double standard when it comes to comparing these two situations. How has Eurovision responded to that?
Yeah, so the day after Russia invaded Ukraine, they were banned from Eurovision. And that's not happened. So protests have called out the double standards. And what, as I see it, you'd be given quite bland statements by the EBU, and they basically always point to the fact that this is a non-political event. So we haven't really been given clear clarification why that double standards exist at the moment. But you've seen now the Swedish opening act. He's a half Palestinian, half Swedish guy who has performed, and he had a keffiyeh around his wrist in the opening act. So you are seeing kind of some signs of protest towards this event.
And was that seen as controversial?
Yeah, he got a slap on the wrist from the organizers, and they came out and said that they're disappointed that he had displayed a political symbol. And he replied saying that he didn't see it as a political symbol. His father had given him the keffiyeh, had told him that it kind of reminds him of where he comes from, and that actually seeing it as a political symbol was racist. So there's been a bit of back and forth between him and the organizers.
So the former Eurovision contestant got the slap on the wrist, as you said, but he wasn't the only one. There was also an incident with the contestant from Ireland, Bambi Thug, who was told to remove the words ceasefire and freedom for Palestine from their outfit. Can you talk to me about Bambi Thug?
Bambi Thug has been voicing opposition to Israel's participation from before this event began. So it was kind of expected, but I have to say it was quite a creative form of protest. So they had ceasefire now written in an ancient language. So I think you had people backstage scrambling to find out what the translation was of that. So, and they've criticized Bambi Thug for kind of displaying that form of protest. But I think when it gets to the final, then we're really going to see some real creative ways that artists are going to protest. And I mean, you have to remember there's a lot of high-profile Swedish artists that have signed this petition to see Israel boycotted. So you've got Robin, who's probably Sweden's biggest pop icon. She's huge in the US, around the world. She came out and signed that petition. So I think when you have high-profile people come out like that, then it really gives other artists a lot of, kind of courage to come out and join them.
So Nils, by the time our audience listens to this episode, the semifinals will be over and the 26 finalists who will compete on Saturday will be set. Is there a sense that Eurovision is cracking down on artists when it comes to freedom of speech, or are these just normal occurrences that happen every year?
Definitely this year it's reached a new level, and there has been some criticism before, but I think we have to go back to the ban on Russia and the participation of Ukraine. I mean, over the past 2 years, there's been just this wave of support for Ukraine in the last 2 Eurovision Song Contests. Ukraine won it a couple of years ago, and it was held in the UK because, of course, they couldn't hold it in Ukraine. And I mean, there you had the level of Ukrainian symbolism was incredible. You had Ukrainian flags everywhere. You had artists coming out in support of it. You had artists changing lyrics to show support for the Ukrainians. So that was a really big deal. And then if you kind of compare that with now, where there's just a complete ban on you cannot have a Palestinian flag and you cannot have any Palestinian symbol.
So let's talk about the significance of all of this tension unfolding in Malmö. It's a city that is not often in the news, but has been so more recently due to a series of burnings of the Quran, something that is legally allowed in Sweden under the country's free speech laws. And as you mentioned, Malmö has this significant migrant and Muslim population, people who protested those Quran burnings. So to add kindling to the fire here of the tensions that the city is already seeing over this competition, you've reported that there are Quran burning events planned for this weekend as well, near the Eurovision venue. How does all of that play into what we've been talking about?
The planned Quran burnings, they're just going to add to the tension. But I have been to a few of these Quran burnings in Stockholm, so another city in Sweden. And I have to say that the Muslim community at large has kind of met this very antagonistic act very peacefully. A lot of them have gone without incident. Now, of course, again, this comes with added weight with Israel's participation in the Eurovision. So I can't say that there won't be some trouble. As I said, it's a very antagonistic act. It depends kind of where it is. But the police, they don't want these Quran burnings to go ahead. I've spoken to many of them, and they have tried to block these Quran burnings from going ahead, but the courts usually override them. However, they have more than a year's experience with dealing with them now. So they're actually giving the person burning the Quran as small a stage as possible. So they'll find a little corner somewhere in the city. They'll release information as late as they can. They'll try and downplay it. A lot of Swedish media aren't covering it anymore. So I'm hoping it goes without incident.
Well, keeping all of that in mind, I want to end with Eurovision because the slogan for Eurovision is United by Music. But with all of the tension in Malmö this week, what has happened to that messaging? Was there ever a time that the event wasn't political?
Yes, I would say I remember Eurovision growing up as just a very kitsch, loud, fun event that didn't kind of come under this political cloud. But I think the fact that they've allowed Israel to be included in this event, but have banned Russia 2 years ago, no one can really ignore it. So this phrase, United by Music, is a very unfortunate choice for the organizers to have gone with. And you actually have Adler, the Swedish artist who wore the keffiyeh, come out and ironically use it back at the organizers. So saying, I wore the keffiyeh because ultimately I believe that we should be united by music. So it's already, you're starting to see a bit of a backlash to that slogan.
And that's The Take. This episode was produced by Ashish Malhotra, Chloe K. Lee, and Sonia Bagat, with Zaina Badr, Veronisa Campana, David Enders, Sarir Khalili, Tamara Kandakar, Catherine Nouhan, Khalid Sultan, Amy Walters, and me, Malika Bilal. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Alexandra Locke is The Take's executive producer, and Ney Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow.